Welcome, everyone. We're just going to give it one more minute on this poll, and then we'll get started. Okay. So it looks like we have a good mix of folks on the call, but primarily it is high volume, full-time, and then intern and cleared. So quite an interesting mix here today. And welcome, everyone, to our webinar here. And just some introductions to kick us off. So a little bit about me. I grew up in recruiting, started as a coordinator, moved into recruiting, then did talent operations, where I figured out that my passion is improving processes and systems for recruiters. It's really what I love to do, which led to my career here at HireClix as a director of consulting services. When I'm not here consulting, I'm also the president of Recruit DC, an organization for recruiters by recruiters. So as you can imagine, recruiting is my life. I'm joined here by Luke Burton, my partner in crime in this optimization project with Kimley-Horn. Luke, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your role at Kimley-Horn?
Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Luke. I work in our Dallas, Texas office at Kimley-Horn. A little bit about our firm. We're about 8,000 employees. Um, we've been on Fortune's list of best places to work for I think 17 years now, which is, we're obviously really proud accomplishment of that. The way we make our money, generally speaking, is through civil engineering consulting services, landscape architecture services, and planning services. So we are consultant. We're one of the largest employers of civil engineering students in the country, as well as landscape architects. So we hire roughly 3,000 people a year. Um, 2,000 of those come from a college campus. The rest of our staff are basically folks that are mid-career type folks. We do a lot of engineering hiring. We also do a lot of marketing, IT support services as well. And yeah, I joined Kimley-Horn 17 years ago. I've always been a recruiter and still do a little bit of recruiting, but I also do a little bit of operational type things with our recruiting systems. And I work with two other partners that kind of help me and kind of help run our operations side of things. And I got to know Mo about, I don't know, like a year or so ago, and you'll learn more about that. But I was introduced to Mo over a year ago, and we got to know each other pretty well. So yeah, thank you all for attending today.
So today's agenda, first things first, it's a big decision, replacing or optimizing your technology. And we wanted to spend the time to talk through that. That was a big part of our work together, Luke and I. Then it's once you've made that decision that you're going to stick with iCIMS and you want to optimize it, you want to improve it for your organization, picking the right approach for you. So we have a couple of different options here. But before we did that, we also went through an iCIMS audit, which helped Luke determine whether or not he wanted to implement to optimize iCIMS, and we talked through those decision criteria. And then we'll talk a little bit about the outcomes and results, and definitely spend some time on lessons learned because we learned a lot of lessons together.
Yeah, yeah, sure did.
So the big decision when we're factoring in whether or not to optimize iCIMS or whether or not replacing iCIMS is the right choice for you, these are the big buckets. Is it flexible? Is the ATS that you're using, in this case, iCIMS, flexible for your organization? And can you customize it for the little nuances that you need? Does it have the functionality that you want? And are you able to optimize that? Can it integrate with the systems that you're using? And then data and analytics. Are you able to tell the story? Hold on one second, just.
Yeah.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then in terms of integration capabilities, also data and analytics, and then the big one that I like to think about when we're talking about an optimization project is the disruption to operations. So are you capable of switching systems given the amount of time it takes to implement a system, which is usually what drives our our optimization projects in general, is did we spend that time implementing like we needed to? Stakeholder input. What are recruiters telling you? What are hiring managers telling you? What are candidates telling you? And then is it scalable? As your organization grows, are you able to grow your system with it?
Yeah, I think I'll just add a couple of things. So about I think a year and a half ago, or really 2 or 3 years ago, we selected iCIMS and we integrated it. And at the time, we did the best we could. We did not have HireClix enlisted. It was a different consultant, and we got through the implementation. And then we kind of felt, first there was a little bit, of cool. This is cool. We can send offer letters through iCIMS. Yay, that's awesome. And but we basically just dawned on us that we had a Ferrari or like a Corvette, pick your favorite sports car, and we were driving at like 15 miles an hour. Like we just weren't using it, and we were just frustrated at each other. Like, well, how do you make it better? Like, what can you do? And we were really at a crossroads of like, do we keep iCIMS? And we did a lot of digging, a lot of research, and at the end of the day, we felt like absolutely iCIMS is a Cadillac. You just got to know how to do it, right? And we just weren't equipped to do it ourselves. Okay, me by myself and my team, we just were not equipped. Okay, I've done a few integrations, but not a lot, right? So I was in over my head. Um, but all of these things, as we looked around, are like, is this what we need? HireClix did help me understand. Oh wow, iCIMS can do that. I just didn't know it could do all that. And so it really helped us kind of understand it's better to optimize, but make no mistake, it took a lot of time, right? And so we're like, okay, do we invest all this time making this better, or do we scrap it and do something different? But as we factored in, the API, the ability for our IT team to integrate UKG into iCIMS, it's awesome, right? We also use another software called Yellow that helps us basically track campus recruiting data points. We also integrated that into iCIMS. So as we learn more about the integrations between other systems, which we just really didn't explore during the initial implementation, we just basically said, hey, we need to keep iCIMS. So and then HireClix helped us with the rest. So, but yeah, all these things were factors, and also the data. A lot of people don't know this, but I mean, with iCIMS, if you go in and you go in their searches, it could be intimidating, right? There's so many, so yeah, there's so many options, and there's so many. You've got to like really invest time, and if you invest time to learn it yourself, particularly if you're in recruiting operations or oversee that, it's going to pay off because anything that's collected in iCIMS is reportable, exportable. Like I've never seen a system like it. I am not a paid spokesperson for iCIMS or for HireClix at all, but really it was awesome what that system can do. So
That's a great tee up to how our initial engagement started, mind you, was the first conversation Luke and I had was not a fan of iCIMS and I'm not a fan of consultants. That was our initial
yeah,
introduction to each other, right? Like it was like, hey, not happy with the system. I'm not happy with what it's doing for me. And it was exactly what you just said. It was, I don't know what I should do. I don't know whether I should just scrap it and start something fresh. So the first thing engagement that we decided to do together was an audit. And the reason why the audit is so critical is it really takes a couple of different steps. And the first is a current process review. What is the talent acquisition team currently doing in the system? What does it look like? And where are the gaps? Spending a lot of time focusing on what do you want it to do? What are you doing outside of the system? Where are those spreadsheets? How are you keeping them that everybody has, right? And then
well, I
we
want to
did
pause
that.
on that.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
that was eye opening. Okay, and at first it felt very uncomfortable, right? Because Mo is very inquisitive, and the lesson we learned is like it really helps you verbalize what you currently do at your company. Once when you say it out loud to someone else that is also a recruiter, um, it helps you kind of realize, okay, as I say this doesn't seem maybe there is something to it, right? And so that process helped us realize that we need to be a little bit more flexible, and we also stuck to our guns on a lot of things. It's like that's
Yeah.
fine. We're going to continue to do it that way. And but that one process, I don't think enough people do that. Having a third party come in, an unbiased party, to really look at how you do was so awesome. Like we sent them spreadsheets and of how some of our recruiters keep track of stuff. We sent them spreadsheets of how we give updates to company leadership about recruiting metrics. They reviewed everything. Like it was a deep dive. And it was it starts out with like, okay, so someone starts tomorrow. What happened?
Mhm.
Who does onboarding? Uh, how do they get this? How do they know that? It's a pretty cool experience. So
And we like to separate current process review from your wish list. And we do that on purpose because what I have found, particularly with recruiters, when you're in the system, you're focused on what you think it is capable of doing. So we have this wish list development meeting, which is a completely different meeting, and it's meant to be brainstorming. And it's literally, we say to Luke, if I could wave a magic wand and your system
yeah,
could do this, what do you want? Like, let's forget what you think is possible. What do you want? And that's what that meeting was about, to really get in there and say, what is it that you want it to do? And what we typically find here with iCIMS in particular is that it's capable of doing 90% of what's on the wish list. There's probably a little bit of nuancy that's specific to the organization or some sort of integration, but 90% of what's on your wish list, it's capable of doing. And it's important to take that time to understand what that really is, what that wish list is.
yeah.
And then we would go behind the curtain. And to Luke's point, I captured all of these spreadsheets, all of it. We had both of these meetings. And then we went in the back end of the system and we said, okay, let's validate. How is the system configured? What levers have they pulled within iCIMS for it to be set up the way during their implementation so that we had an understanding? And then after that, we went back and we had those stakeholder interviews. And to Luke's point, that's why those are so important, because that's when we really got to understand the nuance of Kimley-Horn. It's one thing to say, you should just do this. And it's easy for me to say when I don't have to stand in front of the leadership that he has to stand in front of, or the various consultants saying, no, that is not how we want to do it. We want to do it this other way. So those stakeholder meetings really help us understand what's the nuance of the organization, what's that true business need, and why they're doing the things the way that they were doing. Why did they set it up the way that they set it up? So before we come in here with recommendations that say do this, we've factored in all of those things.
Yeah, and the stakeholders, to give you some context, we have roughly 70 recruiters, and I forget how many you spoke to. It was a handful that I selected, I believe, and also some people in the business side of what we do, and that was also pretty enlightening because once again, she heard a lot of what I was saying and my team was saying, but it was interesting for a recruiter that they were not involved in these meetings to hear what they had to say too, which was helpful for all of us. So yeah.
I think the biggest surprise after that was how many rescinded offers and how many canceled requisitions you had, right? That was like a big surprise.
Yes, 100%. Like we had no clue that that was actually a thing, and our recruiters were wanting to track that more, and we had no way to track that. we we just didn't set it up right, and we went on to fix that. But yeah, that was one of our biggest things too. And then this whole audit thing that y'all did, I want to say it took. I know that there was a question in the chat about the cost, and I won't go into that. I don't work for HireClix, but I will tell you this: I get a lot of quotes across my desk about professional services from vendors, and I was very surprised on how affordable it was. And it was no commitment. It was just I went into this thinking, let's have them audited and tell those recommendations because I think I can do it. I have this person on my team. Her name's Angela. I think she's on this. She's awesome. I was like, I bet Angela can do all of this. So let's just get the audit, have Angela do it, right? And we'll get into that next. But really, the recommendation list that they gave us was a really nice deliverables, like 3 to 5 pages of really detailed things. It wasn't just about in the system, recode this to that. It was also more of the process, which was really kind of interesting. iCIMS isn't just about a system. It's about really how you recruit as an organization. So it has a lot more to do than just what buttons to click. And so that is important to note.
I think some of the high level recommendations that we had, the first one that was like looking back, it's funny, is you hadn't implemented new iCIMS. So it was like that, just the interface. Number one, that new iCIMS experience, that was one of the first things that we did, we implemented. We updated the workflow, to your point. What are the steps and statuses that would make more sense? Or the bins and statuses that would make more sense for your organization, for your team. We talked about recruiter documentation. We all have those recruiter screens. They capture these great notes. Where do we put that in iCIMS? And then how do we deliver that? And how do we communicate that without making the recruiters do it over and over again?
Yeah.
So that
And
was,
I 100%. Yeah, we also created job groupings, which we've never had before. Like she helped us create job groupings. Probably the biggest thing that y'all recommended, don't know if you remember this, is there's this thing called the workflow details page. Okay. And the beauty of having a firm like HireClix is that they see other clients with iCIMS and have solved other problems. And one of their other clients probably had a similar issue. And this workflow details page really helped revolutionize our data. You know, basically it's a spot where a recruiter can go into a page and basically verify some things about the business unit this person would join and when the interview date was and all these other things that really help us with metrics. So that was a big recommendation.
and
Yeah.
yeah, what that was around is the data that was collected for you all when you collected it. So what we did is
Yeah.
for those of you that aren't necessarily familiar, the offer details page, we sort of revisited that and said, the information that's collected here, we actually need that for more than just the offer. We need it at the interview stage. That was important to you. You needed to have data at the interview stage. So that was one of
Yeah.
our recommendations to really build that out, to collect all of that data for you when you need
Yeah,
it.
yeah, and that goes back to that current process review and all that. Like,
Mhm.
I never thought like that, but if you think about it, a recruiter should know if someone has a college degree or not, if the position that they're filling has a college degree. That's a reasonable request, right? So, were we even collecting that? Well, why not? Let's collect it. Let's look at some trends. It's just something simple like that. Well, when do we collect it? You know,
Mhm.
we also looked at our online application process. Like it was too long. We shortened it. And so there was just a lot of things that they helped us kind of, you know, change.
Right. It's thinking about what's the information that you need and when do you need it in the process so that you're not bringing it up too early and overwhelming people, whether it's the candidate, whether it's the recruiter, whether it's the hiring manager. What do you need to know when, whether it's a reporting on it or for some other, if it's onboarding or whatever the case may be, it's factoring that in. All right, so
Yeah.
let's talk about our approach. So we had the audit, we came back to you, we gave you this really big list of recommendations. You took a beat and said, I don't know, Mo, we might do this ourselves. We'll get back at you,
Yeah.
we'll figure it out. And then what we came back with, oh, I wanted to do a poll. Let me forget not to do the poll. Did I put my poll? Aha, I found you now.
And if you have any questions during anything, we are
Yes.
monitoring the chat box. So definitely do that. So
Yep. All
yeah.
right.
Are you tracking things in a spreadsheet? Yeah.
Yeah.
Outside of
So
iCIMS.
that's my
Yeah.
question. How many of you are
Yeah.
doing your data tracking? There's something going on and it's outside of
Yeah.
iCIMS. It's because you don't have a way to collect it or you don't think you have a way to collect it in the system. How many of you are doing that?
Yeah.
We'll give you just a few more minutes to answer that one
Yeah.
for us. And while that's going on,
Yeah.
I will talk a little bit about, so when Luke and I met again, we talked about our typical HireClix optimization approach. And how we do this is it's typically a process optimization. So that audit process, that was really to understand his process so I could provide recommendations, right? And that was really about staying with iCIMS or not. That's what that engagement was about. This was really, now we're staying with iCIMS. How do we want to optimize the process in iCIMS to align with the Kimley-Horn needs? So that's first thing. Everything starts with process. Then HireClix would go in and we would do all the configurations for them. We would do validation and testing, work with them to do that, unit testing, and then also just UAT. We would update all the reports and dashboards. We would do all of this for them. And then we would develop and deliver training. That's our typical process. It's very hands off from a client perspective. We're doing it all and we're handing it back to you so that you can do your day job and not have to think about the implementation at all or the optimization at all, right? That's what that is. And I'm going to pause for a second and give you all the poll results. I know you're all waiting to see. So you can see bulk are yes, you are sharing things, big surprise. you are
Yeah.
doing things outside of the system.
Shame on y'all. Shame on y'all. Poor data. Yeah, and I'll say this. So when it came to this proposal, right? So the audit was basically, hey, come and look at iCIMS, help me, uh, figure out what I can do to make it better, right? And so I thought that that was going to be it, right? And then they presented this to me, and at that time I was like, what's the pros and cons, the cost, all of that kind of stuff, right? And at the end of the day, this was a lot of work. Like we basically stripped this down to the studs and rebuilt it in a lot of different ways. And really, I also have someone on my team, Angela. She was, learning iCIMS, and I was like, well, hey, maybe we should do this for two reasons. A, they're an accountability buddy, right? If I work with iCIMS and have them do this, we're going to have biweekly calls. There's going to be action items. We are going to get stuff done. And then the other benefit is like, well, Mo, there are some changes I don't want you to make. I want you to show Angela how to do it because Angela was running iCIMS for us. So there was a lot of times where Mo would actually like share her screen and say, "Hey, come and do that."
So that's what we
Yeah.
did together. Luke and I came up with
Yeah.
a customized approach for Kimley-Horn because, to Luke's point, we wanted Angela to be able to do these configurations herself, to
Yeah.
own the system, to be that SME. So when this optimization project was over, Luke and Angela were seen as the SMEs. This was their system. They understood everything that we did and why we did it. It wasn't just turned over to them. So we can customize that approach in that way. And so this was the cycle that we developed. It's a slightly different, and I think we had a lot of fun. At least I feel like we did.
Yeah.
It was weekly meetings, as Luke mentioned. And what we did is we determined the roles. We started off with prioritizing the recommendations. And those priorities shift. As you can imagine, we all know things shift. When we first started it, it was like, we're going to do these things first. And then a month later, it was like, oh no, we have to do this. So we would shift. So weekly, we would review our priorities and we would chunk it out. And we would say, okay, what's the first chunk we're going to tackle? And this is
Yeah.
the cycle that we would do. We would determine roles and responsibilities. Sometimes Luke would do configurations. Sometimes Angela would do them. Sometimes I would do them. And we would determine who was going to do it in this particular chunk. And then who was going to talk about training, who was going to like poke it apart and those things. Then we would go and do the configurations. We would test and refine together. Then, depending on whether there was a dashboard tie-in, we would divvy up who's going to be updating the dashboards and reports. We worked together on communications and training. Angela took the bulk of that training. We met separately on many occasions to flesh things out if it was a more complex update. And then we'd do it again. We got one chunk done, then we went through and the cycle started to go over. We went through the whole list of things that we needed to take on. We grabbed another chunk, and then we did who's going to do what, when, and where. And then cycle started again.
Yeah. I like their flexibility because we're pretty protective over how we train our staff. Like I was really kind of off guard of like, well, hold on, I want Angela to do that. And so we were really intentional about some of these things. We really wanted to really own it. And they were really good partners, easy to work with. And they obviously influenced everything that we did and did a lot of it behind the scenes, you know?
And I think the buckets, I'm trying to remember. So it was, I think the first thing we did was we updated the bins and statuses. We updated the workflow.
Yeah, so our bins and statuses, if you're not familiar with that, it's basically a way to kind of like identify two things, like the stage in which this candidate is at for this rec. Are you interviewing them? Did you review the resume and say no? Were they qualified? Were they not qualified? There is like so many options you could have. You can have debates that last for days with other recruiters about what the naming convention should be. Like it's a lot. And how you set up those bins and statuses have such a ripple effect of all of your reporting, right? And it's just you need someone to help you with that because you're going to want to configure it to your organization, but it has a lot of implications. And I'll give you an example. Like we are having a hard time. We have like 500 to 800 people a year that rejoin us. It's not their first time, to join Kimley-Horn. So Mo just had this idea of like, well, you can have a status that says that they're a rehire. hire dash rehire. And we were like, oh my gosh, we just had one hiring status. And so just small things like that you would think would be pretty low impact have a lot of big impacts with reporting.
Yeah,
Yeah, that,
absolutely.
that was a big one. Yeah.
We implemented new iCIMS. That was a chunk
Yeah.
because we wanted to make sure that we were ready for that. We streamlined the application. That was a series of things. We had to have
Yeah.
meetings, not only internally with us on the project team, we worked with your compliance partners, right? So we wanted to make
Yeah.
sure that they felt comfortable. We were removing questions. We were streamlining that process. What were the downstream impacts? How would that impact the organization? Because our goal was to get the application to 3 minutes or less.
Yeah. That was a big one. So, like in a perfect world, you would want every one of your applicants to fill out an exhaustive application, right? We all would want to know that. We want to know where they live, or can they relocate? What their education. We would love all that. Reality is that candidates fall off. The more clicks, you're going to lose candidates. So you have to do. There's a risk reward with collecting data from a candidate, and HireClix kind of helped us realize it's all about the candidate experience. Candidates want to click 2 to 3 times and move on. And if you make it too difficult, they're not. And so we just discovered our online application was too long. We had problems with our education table. It was like 2,000 schools. And so like people weren't even like filling out the right school, right? And so that's another small example of a big change that we made that we think that it did increase our application. Less people fell out of that process because of that.
Yeah, because what we did is we created a custom field for education because
Yeah.
you only cared about certain schools where you were investing and you had that partnership.
Yeah.
It wasn't as important. So it was like, here's the schools you could choose from because this is where we're investing. Because you said what, 2,000 hires a year, 1,000 hires a year from schools.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's important that we get that right. So
Yeah.
that was the priority. It wasn't, I want to know everyone's background. It was where are we investing in our college program. So we had that custom
Yeah.
field built for that.
Yeah.
But it depends, right? So that was the Kimley-Horn experience. If some of the folks that are on the call are high volume recruiting, it may be a little bit of a different flex. It may be a different approach in that. But going back to that principle of when do you need to know the information? And there's a variety of different ways within iCIMS to capture it. It doesn't have to be in that initial expression of interest, that initial application. There's iForms, there's other mechanisms, the recruiter screen to get the information that you need to get about a candidate. It doesn't all have to be dumped on them the minute they express interest.
Yeah. One other huge thing, no, you probably don't remember this, but we didn't understand the LinkedIn integration.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are LinkedIn, just, we're enterprise customers, right? And it is game changing, the iCIMS integration with LinkedIn. So we just didn't know how to link people with the recruiter license. And once we figure that out, you can be in LinkedIn and you can search for people. And if they're connected, even if they have different email addresses from LinkedIn and iCIMS, you can connect them and you'll see like a logo saying that they're in the ATS. And then you can do searches. So if you're trying to find new talent that your team hasn't discovered yet, go and filter the people that are in your ATS. So that was also a huge game changer. We also walk through Yellow. We collect data on some candidates, or not candidates, but some basically we go to career fairs, we meet some folks. And if they apply online, whatever's in Yellow will then transfer to iCIMS, which was a game changer.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
a huge integration for you all.
Yeah.
It's a huge investment given the population of candidates that are coming from Yellow
Yeah.
and getting that data in a usable format for the recruiters at their fingertips when they're working with candidates and not having to re-enter it and it being accurate was a huge deal.
Yeah. So a lot of back in the old days, a recruiter at Kimley-Horn would review their online application. Then they would go back and they would go look at the paper resumes that they met at a career fair, who was in the yes stack or the no stack, or whatever it may be. And then we evolved and started putting it into a spreadsheet. And then we finally got Yellow. And then, so still, recruiters were logging into Yellow with one screen and having to type in their name in iCIMS to see did they apply or not. Well, now we can do that automatically because of the integration. That was a game changer.
And part of that was updating profiles. What we did is there was
Yeah.
a opportunity for custom fields that made sense to Kimley-Horn. And a lot of that was around your disciplines, your GLCs, and graduation years. Talk a little bit about those and how you use those for data. I think that's important for folks to hear.
Yeah, I mean, so golly, there's that's a lot. So education's super important for professional services firms. So like think of the Deloitte of the world that hire a lot of college talent, or Pepsi or Coca-Cola or whoever, right? We also hire a lot of people from college. Data really kind of helps run recruiting strategies. Like you got to know how many people are applying from these schools, right? How many people from these schools and these programs are getting into the interview process. And without the proper coding and having it set up in iCIMS, you can't. And so we couldn't until we changed things. But coding people as a recruiter, a GLC or job code, as a lot of companies do it, like this is a level one or employee or level two engineer. A lot of that can help understand, okay, well, is there a pay range associated with that job code? It helps us audit things to say, well, this title and this job code don't really interact, or the posting title doesn't interact with this. So that was really kind of tricky. One of the questions was about an example of a job grouping. So and in iCIMS, you can add things like this is a marketing department hire, this is in a finance department hire, this is an engineering department hire. But does it tell you, well, is this entry level talent? Is this technical talent? Is this executive level talent? That's almost like what a bucket is. So in our firm, we have buckets of college. If someone joins us out of college, that kind of role, or early talent, we call it college. For marketing, IT roles, we call those business roles. Those are business roles. For experienced engineers, we have another word, right? It just made sense for our organization. It's just a way for me to run a report in iCIMS where I don't have to select 20 different titles. It's a way to aggregate 15 to 30 titles into one generic group of people.
And I
That's
think
what
that
that
was
is.
the big deal with the custom fields for you, and being able to group or bucket people that way
Yeah.
helped us utilize entrance criteria within within the limits for filters, right? So if we're thinking about reporting, this is getting super advanced, but when we're thinking about reporting and those filters, adding those custom fields allowed us to Luke's point, he didn't have to say all of these titles. It was, this is the specific group of people that I need for my report. And it enabled us to do that. So there was a couple of different
Yeah.
things we did for custom fields. And that was really what it was driving. How do we get the data out of the system?
Yeah, entrance criteria, don't sleep on that. So if you have iCIMS or are considering it, entrance criteria is a way basically to prevent bad data. So I'll give you an example. We have it set up to where if a recruiter wants to put someone as a candidate's interviewing in the interview bin, right? They can't do that unless they fill out certain pieces of data. In that case, they have to do a phone screen, right? So if you're going to put someone present it to an office interview, well, you need to phone screen them. So we make it to where certain fields on our screening form in iCIM, they have to be filled out. Okay. Another example of entrance criteria: we do not allow anyone to make an offer. Like you can't even click the button unless certain pieces of data are filled out, like their salary. You'd be surprised, folks, right? So you have to have a salary filled out to generate the offer letter, right? You also need to know what department they are on. We also have our recruiters code the candidates. Like, how did we find them? Those are things that have to be done before the offer. And then to hire a candidate, we have entrance criteria on that. We have entrance criteria on declining a candidate. So if a candidate declines an offer, you just can't say they declined an offer. You have to have certain fields on their profile filled out about why they declined the offer. So those are examples of that. We had no clue that that existed. And what that allows you to do is to rely on your recruiting data. Because a lot of times we just didn't trust it until entrance criteria.
Agreed. And I think a lot of folks think about entrance criteria as, I'm going to make sure that the recruiting team follows a specific process. But it also has that capability, as you're mentioning, to make sure that the data that you need is there from a reporting perspective. So making sure
Yeah.
that there's fields, if you need it to report, then that has to be on there.
Yeah. And I guess one big takeaway is for all of this to work, You got to give recruiters a reason to do it. You just can't say, hey, recruiters, I got all these processes you're going to start to follow. You have to show them the benefit. Okay. That's step one. Show them the benefit. And number two is make them rely on it. If they
Mhm.
have to rely on this data to be accurate, they are going to pay attention to it. Okay. The way you do that is on this slide, update dashboards and reports, right?
Yep.
That was huge. So we had no clue. We still had, like, when we implemented iCIMS, we had a few little charts and graphs that just really no one used them. No one used any of the dashboards. We started making these dashboards and recruiters like, oh my gosh, this is awesome.
It's life
And
changing.
yeah, they're like, well, why am I they're like, well, why is this number not like that? Well, you need to update iCIMS. And it kind of came a joke with our recruiting team, but they kind of rallied behind it, and they actually like it. It's weird, but but they like it, you know?
Who wouldn't, right? Like you work
Yeah,
really hard as a recruiter and to have it
yeah,
in front of you to say, this is how many screens I had. This is how many interviews I had. This is the things I need to follow
yeah,
up on. Here's the people I need to call. Here's my call list. It's huge. And it's things that we would typically track on a spreadsheet outside of the system. And if you take
yep,
that time to understand what are the recruiters tracking in a spreadsheet outside of the system, what
yeah,
can we put on a dashboard for them? That's huge with user adoption. You hit the nail on the head, Luke.
yeah, and
Start
you
making
also
these changes. Yeah, it's talking to them and understanding what training do they need? Do they understand what you're asking them to do?
yeah,
And then how can we make it valuable to them?
yeah, and I think recruiters too. Whenever we did the needs and out the audit, we were really kind of wanted to approach our partners, the recruiting team, in a way to say, hey, this is a safe space. It's okay if you have your spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Can you share it with us? Because sometimes they are very protective of that. So,
Oh, we have a good
yeah,
question here. So how about timing? So we met every week. Luke,
yeah,
Angela, myself, and Mark. But how fast we moved depend on how big the chunk that we were taking on in that time. Some of them were smaller chunks and we could do it really quickly. Others were bigger. And there were a lot that we were parallel pathing, right, Luke? Like some we were working on while we
yeah,
were ready to release it.
yeah, and 100%. So yeah, we would meet once a week, have action items, and it kept us honest because we were paying a consultant. We're like, okay, we can't let our partners down. We're paying money for this. We need to show up and we need to do our part. And in implementation, a lot of times the client is the bottleneck. And so having a vendor help you is there. And also, how long did we have iCIMS before working through this process? We had it, I think, a year and a half to 2 years, I think, right? About a year and a
Yeah.
half,
Yeah.
about a year and a half, something like that. And we just weren't in a good spot with it. But then we realized that, oh, wow, I think we learned a lot of lessons on our end of things we could have done better. Uh, in the implementation. And,
This is
and the
another
whole
good one for you.
oh, real quick though, but the whole process was quick. Like we like talked. I remember calling Mo and Kara like in January of that year. We were done by August. So I'm talking like my first call with them. We didn't really get started till like March. The audit was a couple months, and then we that summer we knocked out all these changes. And we not we knocked them off. It was crazy. It was crazy. All right. So there's a question here, Luke. Who did your implementation of iCIMS? Was that directly through iCIMS, or did you use an implementation partner? In your Ferrari analogy, I've actually used to explain our. Well, we should talk. Yeah. I'm not going to tell you the name of the. We did have a consultant. I'm not going to let you know who they are, but we did had a different consultant advise us. And I think really looking back at that implementation, there were just, this is no fault to iCIMS or even that consultant. I think a lot of it was on us too. Like we're a proud organization and we weren't really ready to have outsiders come and tell us how to do some stuff, right? And so you have to be ready to be open to that. And
Mhm.
we just weren't, right? And I think that was a part of it. But yes, we had just kind of a rocky implementation where we just didn't we just didn't have the bandwidth to really do it right, and we didn't. I don't know. It is
I
what
think
it is.
that's a big challenge, right? Because it's you want new technology. Usually it's because either a contract is ending
Yeah.
or you're so frustrated with your current technology, you purchase
Yeah.
another one and you're like, I'll just do this off the side of my desk. It's fine. We'll just get it done. And then you rush through it. And then at the end, you're like, this isn't, I don't, and it takes
Yeah.
a year to figure that out.
And at that time, y'all, we did not have a recruiting operation or business operations team. It was really, one quasi operational HR operational type person, and 5 recruiters that this was their side hustle, right?
Yeah.
And,
And
and
that's typical.
yeah, so going back, if I, yes, I'm glad what happened. I don't think iCIMS would be what it was for our organization unless all of that happened. It had to happen. Really, for a lot on us and our culture change with how we needed to kind of view our recruiting process, right? And anyway, so the original implementation of iCIMS, I don't remember. I actually wasn't involved in the original implementation of iCIMS, for a couple of reasons, but I think it was like 6 months probably is a typical timeline, right, Mo, with a
It
client?
depends. I've seen some pretty aggressive ones where it's like, we're gonna get it done in 14 weeks or
Yeah.
all the way up through 6 months. I've been on them that took over a year, just depending on the organization. So iCIMS will definitely flex with the organization how long it takes. It's truly organization driven, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
definitely. It all depends.
yeah, it's
And
client driven.
it all
Absolutely.
depends on like how much data you want to bring from your old system and all that. And the other question is
Integration.
that Kimley-Horn is about 8,000 employees. We hire about 3,000 people a year. We typically grow anywhere between 10 to 20% a year, and that's been consistent. When I started in 2007, we were like 2,000 people, and now we're 8,000. And I think we're on the trajectory to go to 10, 12, 15 in the next 5, 10 years.
Woohoo.
Yeah.
I think one
All
of the
right.
other big takeaways from our approach, which was unique for me, was the fact that we had these weekly meetings and we were reevaluating. It gave us the opportunity to have some healthy debates. Like we went back and forth on some things, whether we were going to use parent-child requisitions, how we were going to use user groups versus entrance
Yeah.
criteria. And for you all, the right decision wasn't user groups, it was entrance criteria. And we had a lot of back and forth on that.
Yeah, no, we had some very lively spirited debates, without a doubt, and it was great. And so we just really built a good rapport. And also, uh, really, whenever you do something like this, you want to keep your team small, you know. So really, it was Angela, myself, and then our IT guru. All right, so we had an IT guru who knows all about everything with IT, and that was really our team, a team of 3 people at Kimley-Horn, one with Mo, and that was a pretty good group. Yeah. So cool. Let's maybe go to the results now too, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
then, but and while we're doing that, like
Yeah.
this question is around buy-in.
Yeah. The buy-in was simple just because we showed them why before we did it. We said,
Yeah, that
hey,
was
here's the problem. Like,
yeah.
you're doing this because of that. What if we did it like this? Like, I did a little bit of selling. I am a
I think part of
recruiter.
that too was the
Yeah.
audit, right? Because
Yeah.
it was you were able to say, here's what it's not doing for us. And if we did these recommendations, this is what it could do. So that helped. And the
Yeah.
audit is much less of a uh uh what am I trying to
Yeah.
say? Much less
Well,
of an expense. It's like a test drive.
yeah, no, I think what I did, if I recall, is that I want to say I met with the recruiters after the audit and kind of said,
Mhm.
hey, here's where we're at, y'all.
Mhm.
We had an outside consultant come in. This is what they're proposing and why we're doing it. And they were like, cool. They were cool with it. So um, we do a lot of auditing of data now, to catch errors. But that was pretty intense the first 3 months for the adoption of it. But after about 3 months, recruiters got a hold of it. They like it. They love what iCIMS shows them in forms of the dashboards and the reports. They love it. It saves them time. So yeah, so the results, yeah, like the real-time data, that's huge. So thanks to iCIMS right now, like check it out. We have like 900 summer interns, almost 1,000 summer interns, right? I can tell you right now how many of them are getting offers, how many are not. It's a thing of beauty. We've never been able to do that. So having the ability to like report real data is great. For example, our IT department just emailed Angela today saying, "Hey, Angela, how many people are joining us the rest of the year that we have accepted offers? And can you predict? Give me your best guess. We got to order laptops. How many more people are going to show up? You think?" And she was able to do that using iCIMS data. She went back to the fourth quarter of 2023 to see how many people we hired then. So having that data, we just could not trust our recruiting data at all, and our ability to be better partners to IT, to legal, to compliance, to HR, it really has helped that relationship a lot. Cool. And then data driven hiring decisions. Like I said, we spend a lot of money at college recruiting. This kind of helps us direct our efforts. Okay. We can track a lot of different initiatives and really see if the proof is in the pudding. Already talked about improved collaboration. Like recruiting is kind of the cradle of employee data at your company, right? If you do it right, if you get the data right, if you integrate it with your other systems, it becomes a great tool that IT can use for a variety of reasons. Finance, accounting can use, compliance, and your HR partners. Recruiters, they like iCIMS. It's wild, man. Like they like it. Some of them still use old iCIMS, and they like that too. But what they love is just the ability to see where they're at. We're not very metrics focused, meaning we don't really say, "Hey, recruiter, you need to fill this position in 10 days." That's not how we are. We're more about how, what's your rec load, or, are you doing okay? Or like, wow, like, are we hiring this much in this part of the country versus that part of the country? What, like, why is it different? That's been pretty cool to see those numbers, and the recruiters actually like seeing those numbers. Candidates, it's a quicker application process, and improved communication with the firm. Like I said, our ability to actually say, "Hey, here is who has accepted offers. Here's how many offers are out." We never could, depend on that, but now we can.
I
Yeah,
have one slight takeaway. You are a very data-driven organization, but you're not like you don't
yeah,
expect the recruiters to follow a specific process. Like you needed flexibility within that framework. You needed them to be able to recruit the way they wanted to. That was
yeah,
important to you. And then it
yeah,
was
yes, yeah,
that was one of the big things, at least for us, is when we first started it, they did not like iCIMS. Like it was like, I didn't like it. It doesn't do what I need it to do.
yeah.
And I'm doing all these things outside of the system. Everything I do in iCIMS is literally to check the box to get an offer out. I don't even, and then after the project, and I think part of one of the questions is around training and implementation in our cycle, we work together differently to say, what's the level of education we need to give the recruiters? What types of meetings do we need to have with them? And as we evolved, Angela had really comprehensive training for them to say,
Yeah.
this is what we're doing. And then she had calls to say, okay, what's working, what's not? How can we adjust?
Yeah, that was huge. Like actually writing down like a guidebook, that was huge, and actually training them was gigantic. Um, yeah, that was, and also user groups. That's another huge thing that Mo taught us, right? So we have a group of recruiters at Kimley-Horn that just recruit differently because they recruit for like C-suite. I'll just say that they're
Yeah.
not C-suite, but C-suite type candidates. There's 10 of these recruiters. They hire 100 people a year. Let's just say that a lot of these candidates they're getting is through headhunting style recruiting tactics. These candidates aren't just applying online, right? So we created a different experience for those recruiters, right? And we just really said, okay, if you're recruiting for these types of roles, this is what your iCIMS dashboards are going to look like. That was a huge thing as well. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So encapsulating how much time you think the team has saved. That's a good question. That's
Yeah. A lot. I don't know that like I want to say like I'm telling you it's a lot. Part of it is that they would spend a lot of time if average recruiter would have to summarize some data to some leaders in the groups that they serve.
right.
A
It's
lot of
those
times
data
we'll
calls.
yeah. Yeah, so that saved a lot of times. Also the way that you do offer letters, huge. The big thing. So because we built confidence in iCIMS, they have an interview scheduling tool that we don't use for a lot of our candidates, but for high volume positions we do. It's basically that the candidate can schedule an interview for, without having to email the recruiter back and forth, and they can access their calendar. That was game changing. I'm talking like recruiters that were skeptical or raving fans of that function. That saves a ton of time. I'm talking like someone applies, you click a button, an email goes to them saying, "Hey, I liked your resume. Let's talk. Click this link." They click the link. Next thing you know, you have a phone screen scheduled.
It's
That,
amazing.
that,
Like, I don't know,
that yeah.
like being able to recruit and having self-scheduling is huge. Like,
Yeah. Like if you're doing high volume roles, like you do that. Now, 1 out of 10 candidates will ghost you and you'll have to call them. So sometimes you have to remind recruiters, hey, how many people did you send that email to that they didn't respond? Well, you need to call them up. So
yeah.
yeah.
All right, so let's talk lessons learned.
Yeah. So open mind. I mean, I could be quite, I could be stubborn at times, right? And kind of firm in my positions. And we really realized that we should have an open mind when we did this implementation. Just going through the process really helped us understand, well, let me hear Mo out, you know, and, um, we'd hear her out and we'd say yes or no, right? But we'd
Mhm.
hear her out. And then there are some things that she's, suggested we said no to at the time, but we did them now, like the user groups. Yeah. So she usually is right on most things.
I didn't
But
pay him, I promise.
no, she did not. She did not. But that was a big thing. Um, the implementation, looking back, the lessons learned. I mean, whenever you do an implementation, you got to have the right team. They have to know what they're getting into, and you have to keep people accountable, and you have to have executive level uh, uh, guide. You need to have a guide, like some type of leader to help meet with that team on a weekly or biweekly cadence. And I think if you do those things, you'll have a more successful implementation. Training's huge. Like we just really upped our game with the way that we train people and how to communicate with them. Like how much, should this be an email or a Teams message or a one pager? Should we post it on our internet? Or there's a lot of that Mo helped us figure out. Partnership with the technical team. So we have a great IT partner.
Oh,
And
amazing.
yeah, he's awesome. I will not tell you his name, right? Because I want you
It's
to recruit him.
recruiters.
I know. Um, but really working with him, I mean, you've got to be lockstep with him, and he's such a value add. Also, experimentation and test environment. I was always of let's just go live. Let's just go live with the change. Like I'm cool, Mo. No, Mo, your proposal's great. Let's just go live. Um, Really walking through the implications of wow, you don't want to go live. You want to use the test environment. So iCIMS has a test environment that I'm always been a skeptic of a test environment until I played around with iCIMS. I was like, oh, this does make sense. I don't know how they did it. It's brilliant. But you can really test like real data in real time and test your theories, get the kinks worked out, run a report, see if it worked, and then go live. That was huge. And entrance criteria really was awesome. That was great.
Yeah, I think that was a big one together, just using entrance criteria then differently than I have had in the past. Like I said, it was typically around driving someone to use a specific process, but thinking of entrance criteria and data validation, because it's if you don't have the data in the system and you don't have it accurate, then it's impossible to pull the reports that you need.
Yeah, the data validation is huge. And I will say this, AI is the hot topic, right? Well, I like to think of it as like data is going to continue to inform and drive recruiting strategy, right? And as AI does, as it gets better, as automation gets better, having data and good, valid data is going to be critical for a lot of our recruiting organizations, in my opinion. So yeah,
Absolutely.
cool.
All right, so we have some time for some additional questions. What else do you all want to learn about
Yeah.
from our project?
Mo, I know you touched on this a little bit, but a question came in. What is the benefit of having HireClix come in and do an audit prior to an optimization project?
I think that's really around that business case. I think for two reasons. Number one is you want to make sure that this is the right decision for your organization. So that audit really helps that. And then it also helps the team take a step back and say, what are we currently doing? What's not working and what's possible? And I think that's what's great about an audit. And to get that business case to say, okay, It's going to take time, energy, and resources to make this happen, to make this shift. Why are we doing it? And ground it in that and say, this is what it's going to look like when we're done. I think that's really the value in having that audit first. It really puts it all together before you
Yeah.
engage. And it really justifies why you need the resources to do an optimization.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine not doing the audit because the audit really helps direct your
Yeah.
engagement. So as a client, the audit was a value add to make sure that there was no scope creep. And it's like, hey, we're going to be doing this, right? And this is what I want to do. It was great. Yeah.
This is a good question. What would you wish you had done differently following the HireClix enhancement of iCIMS?
I would have done user groups. So like we kind of sparred with Mo on user groups, and a user group is basically a way to kind of say, okay, if you have a recruiting team that does this type of recruiting, put them in their own user group. So when they log in, they see different dashboards, or you can even to where they see different statuses that make more sense to them. That's my biggest regret. I hate to say it, but Mo was right. We should have done that for we actually ended up doing a user group for our executive level recruiters. So they have their own user group and they can see different things. We just weren't ready as an organization.
Got to do what's right for
But
you when it's right.
but we are now. But that was mine right there. Another question too is, do we feel we created more custom fields than using the iCIMS standard fields for data validation? Yes. For example, we scrapped the education table from iCIMS and UKG. All right, we actually ended up using UKG's education table for us because we're a UKG customer for the HRS. So we ended up saying, okay, when we capture education, we are going to be feeding in the fields from UKG and iCIMS. We created a lot of fields that are really unique to us, I think. So we created probably a dozen custom fields,
Oh yeah.
that more than that, probably a couple dozen. Some of
No,
those fields are unique in UKG and flow over. So, the data lives in UKG and flows over. Others we created within iCIMS. Yeah.
and they're relatively simple to do, but they have such a huge impact. And it's the
Yeah.
great thing about the custom fields is it's that nuance of the organization. There's things that are relevant to Kimley-Horn
Yeah.
that aren't necessarily relevant to anyone else, like a GLC and some of those other things
Yeah.
that you all do. The what is it? I'm forgetting the name now. The engineering type.
Well, yeah. Yeah. The whole thing.
Discipline.
We have
Discipline.
yeah, we have discipline, we have sort codes, we have all
Yeah.
kinds of stuff, crazy stuff, man. Um, Yeah, they have a question for you, Mo. Do you have clients that have an ATI or API that doesn't integrate with their HRS?
Yes. Yes, and that's a choice whether or not your ATS integrates with iCIMS. I don't know if your question is there a HRS that isn't capable of? And I would say you can do a custom integration. There's no limits to what you can integrate with iCIMS if you have the technical resource internally within your organization to do that custom integration.
And that's the beauty of iCIMS. Like your IT team, they can do all kinds of stuff. When it comes to integrations, they might have to build a custom one, but they have some custom integrations. I'm not going to speak on behalf of iCIMS, but really, I mean, my IT guy loves iCIMS, the flexibility of what we can do with it. Yeah.
It sounds like for this particular organization, it's an ATS that or an HRS
Yeah.
that's saying it doesn't. So we can probably talk offline to see what options there are there.
Yeah, because there's always a custom option, like you
Yeah,
said,
yeah. It's
a
just
custom option.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 And I was having so much fun with questions. I didn't just as a follow up with HireClix, recruitment marketing agency, Boston based, been around forever, and a certified iCIMS partner. It's a lot of our focus. We spend a lot of time there and enjoy those partnerships and helping our teams optimize iCIMS. So reach back out, like Rachel said, the slide deck will be shared with you after the fact. Happy to talk a little bit about this engagement or others and answer any questions that you have.
Yeah.
Thank you, Luke. This was fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you all. And like, if you have any other questions, hit me up. I'm on LinkedIn. My email address is luke.burton@kimley-horn.com. You can email me directly if you have a question. Yeah.
I can put that back up. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. There we go.
All right. Y'all have a great afternoon.
Yeah. Thank y'all.